Greetings, unsettled souls, and welcome to The Correct Views. Sam I.B. DeGangi reporting for The Media Speaks. And right before we go into it, I want to address something that came to me on Facebook. If you're not subscribed to The Correct Views or following The Correct Views on Facebook, do so, because a lot of the stories that I think are interesting that don't make it to the show oftentimes get posted on Facebook. And there's a lot of really interesting news there. I can't do commentary on every article I see. I wish I could. But anyway, people questioning, people saying that facts are opinions. I got this on Facebook concerning a vaccine. If someone gives you sources and proof that mercury is a neurotoxin, and they put neurotoxins in vaccines, that means that vaccines are not as safe as people say that they are. I'm not doing a vaccine topic, but I do want to address this point. An opinion is not something that can be proven. This show largely gives facts, just to be clear. Is there ever opinions? Yes, and I let you know when it is. Some things that are not opinion. The planet has not warmed up in between 15 to 18 years, depending on the scientist and the study. Why do I say that? This is from Prison Planet, Kurt Nemo. The problem with the pound Twitter sign, pound flood Wall Street. And it's interesting to note what the article points out here. Of course, Drudge mentioned that all the green people that came out in support of the greening of the planet left more trash and garbage behind than you could possibly imagine. It was far worse than they found at other rallies for other political groups on either side of the aisle. The other important thing to note is that man is not warming the planet. You can go to climategate.com and look up the facts, not the opinions, that prove that it isn't happening. It's not an opinion that I have. It is a fact that I am conveying. Hundreds of environmentalists marched on the financial district in New York on Monday and demanded action on the globalist-designed anthropogenic climate change crisis, that is to say man-made global climate change. Because they can't say warming anymore because they already lost that one. Activists declared they will risk arrest in order to deliver their message that capitalism is destroying the planet. Yeah, communism is great for the planet. Look at how great China is doing. Those thousands of dead pigs floating down the river. Oh yeah, communism. That's the way to go. That'll save the planet. The climate crisis is fundamentally an issue of the economy, an activist told CNN. Flood Wall Street is an attempt to bring the problem to the doorstep of the people who are fundamentally responsible for the crisis that we find ourselves in now. First of all, there is no crisis. Second of all, capitalism has done more to help the environment than anything else. Why do I say that? Because it's through capitalism that the most money can be raised for land purchases. And I am in favor of a private person, not the government. You want to save the land? Buy it. Buy the land. Do whatever you want to with it. Save, like Rush likes to say, save the caribou. Do whatever you want. Buy the land. And I think capitalism is what would allow that to happen. Obviously, that's not going to happen in a communistic government. For those of you naive enough to think that you are communists, do you know that communism has done more to hurt the environment than anything? If you don't believe this, then look at Chernobyl Mavec. Search it online. Go ahead and search North Korea environmental leaks, particularly from their nuclear ambitions, and you will see clearly that capitalism is not the driving problem in the hurting of the planet. Instead of focusing on the predations of the financial class, liberal activists are dwelling on widely debunked climate change, and there's a link to that for those of you who think that it's an opinion. Most notably, that the marginal warming of the planet's atmosphere is the result of carbon emissions produced by industrial capitalism. Yeah, the dude that said that to me is now going to go follow all of my sources. Go ahead. You'll find that I back them up. Don't forget as well, the Rockefellers are really upfront in buying out of coal and getting away from coal. Why? Because they are the ones invested up to the neck with people like Al Gore as their advisors to invest in the kinds of technologies that they're going to force you to have. So that's important to realize that these are not good people that are doing this. These are people who are doing it in order to further the growth of the 1%. Financial domination, not carbon, is the real issue. I like that it's pointed out here, and I think you will as well. The problem is the bankers, not the bankers causing global warming. They looked at the forest and saw trees. The real crisis, a whittled away middle class, that is to say, a middle class that is vanishing in the West, and increased poverty, misery, disease, and death in an exploited third world, is directly attributable to the debt and fractional reserve financial economic system engineered by the ruling elite comprised of banksters, mainly J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs. What does that sentence mean? It is because of the very way that the fractional reserve system is set up. What Ron Paul wanted to get rid of. He wanted to eliminate a system that allowed for the upward mobility of a very small number of rich people, and tended to, through many ways, but also through interest, unnecessarily burden and tax the population. There's the third world, it is mentioned in there, the exploited third world, in terms of conquering these nations by loans, and then taking the money and destroying the area that they're in, doing far more harm to the world in ways that go beyond just green issues or environmental issues, but going much deeper. It said the elite are using derivatives and other speculative instruments. For those of you that don't know what that is, let's say you've got $10,000 here, but you think it's going to make an additional $10,000 now. You bet the whole 20, and if you lose a whole bunch of people's money with you. It says they use these instruments to demolish the real productive economy and siphon wealth upward, making the rich richer, leaving an increasingly pauperized wasteland in their wake. In other words, pauperized, I guess is the word I'm trying to read there. Make you paupers, make you poor, keep you at the bottom. The reason you can't get ahead, you're never supposed to say you were cheated. You know who told you that? The people who cheated you. You, me, all of us, we have been cheated of our birthright, among other things. And it's done by these people. Get your money out of banks, Morgan, Citigroup, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. Get out of these corporate banks. Currently, they're in an astounding $1.5 quadrillion in toxic derivative system. But they don't mention any of this. It says with the $280 trillion of world debt and the $1.5 quadrillion in derivatives, this will lead to a collapse that will take the world back 50 years or maybe even further. Governments and central banks are totally aware of the deflationary risks. In other words, the things that catapult your money down. That's why they have printed and created tens of trillions of dollars and lowered interest rates to zero, warns Egon von Greyers, the founder of Matterhorn Asset Management in Switzerland. So instead of taking the banksters to task for all things, including any environmental damage, not warming the environment, but doing things like GE is TEPCO, who melted down Fukushima, really hurt the environment. Instead of going after these people, these boneheads decided to go after the banksters on the opinion that man is warming the planet, when the facts say that it is not. USnews.com, STEM grads are at a loss. That is IT people. This is a lie. And I can tell you it's a lie on a number of fronts. First of all, I have an IT degree. I have a degree in interactive media technology. Quite simply put, I'm a graphics person. I'm video savvy. I don't have Premiere right now, the program I need to make this look spiffier. But if you donate, I will, at thecorrectviews@hotmail.com. I know how to I website design, not programming, but the actual designing, the HTML, the JavaScript. That's all my thing. I also have extensive training in music and video production, especially music production. Well, there's this rumor that there is a shortage of people and we need to bring in people from other countries. That's not what's happening. What's happening is they're bringing in people from other countries who have these degrees because these people will take and work for $12 an hour at an agency on a guest worker program and then leave and take the money back to Mexico, which is a fortune there. Where in this country, especially with how much an education is, and I can tell you it's bad, that job should be a $20, $25 an hour job. But by doing it this way, they can shaft the American people and say that there's a shortage. And as you're going to see here, there is not. All credible research, it says, finds the same evidence about the STEM workplace. Ample supply, stagnant wages, and by industry accounts, thousands of applicants for any advertised job. All of that is true. The real concern should be about dim employment prospects for our best STEM graduates. Whenever you hear that, think IT. The National Institutes of Health, for example, has developed a program to help new biomedical PhDs find alternative careers in the face of unattractive job prospects in the field. Opportunities for engineers vary by the field and economic cycle. As oil exploration has increased, so has demand and salaries for petroleum engineers. It says, in contrast, average wages in the IT industry are the same as those that prevailed when Bill Clinton was president. Despite the cries of shortage, overall, U.S. colleges produce twice the number of STEM graduates annually as find jobs in those fields. In the face of these stark facts, we now see several studies that seem to have desperate Hail Mary passes using rather unconventional means to find shortages. And guess what? There aren't any. Some analysts do this by expanding the definition of STEM jobs. I can't talk. I need a drink. Excuse me. Traditionally, those involved in innovation, discovery, and development, to include air conditioning technicians and even some retail jobs. In other words, as long as you're working in anything at all, if you have a degree in the electronics and you're working in the electronics section of Busy Beaver, then they consider you a success story. That's what they're doing to make it look like there's placement far better than there is. Cries that the STEM sky is falling are just the latest in a cyclical pattern of shortage predictions over the past half century, none of which are even remotely accurate. In a desert of evidence, that is to say zero, the growth of STEM shortage claims is driven by heavily industry funding for lobbyists and think tanks. Their goal is government intervention in the market under the guise of solving national economic problems. I know this all sounds boring, but don't zone out. What they're saying is they are deliberately bringing this entire problem that doesn't exist to the front pages so that they can pull off what I talked about at the beginning. The highly profitable IT industry, for example, is devoting millions to convince Congress and the White House to provide its employers with low-cost foreign guest workers instead of trying to attract and retain employees from the ample domestic labor pool of native and immigrant citizens and permanent residents. In other words, if you got into the country legally and you got a degree and made something out of yourself, or if you were born here and did the same thing, they don't want you to get the jobs. They are telling Congress that there's a shortage of us, that we need guest workers, and they're doing it on purpose so that they can get away with paying lower wages and further destroying the middle class in this field. So listen up, it's important. Guest workers currently make up 2/3 of all new IT hires, but employers are demanding further increases. If such lobbying efforts succeed, firms will have enough guest workers for at least 100% of their new hiring. In other words, that is the way you get away with completely destroying the Americans' way of life, be they a legal immigrant or born here, in favor of illegal immigration and guest worker programs that will bring our wages down even further. Guys, I want to get to a couple stories here on the ridiculous war on drugs. One of these is Casey Griffin, editor of Young Voices, and this is endthewarondrug.org. The war on drugs simply doesn't work. Of course it does, Sam. Don't you see all of the people in prison for drugs? Let me tell you what I see. I see people in prison for doing whatever they want to their own bodies. It's between them and God, to some degree their families. It is not a job of the federal government. It's not even really a job of the state government to say what one person can do with their own body. If they harm somebody while on it, that's a whole other story. We already have laws for that. On May 12, 1996, Miami police raided the home of Richard Brown on the false tip that the 73-year-old retiree with no criminal record was selling drugs. After busting the door open, police claimed that Richards began firing a gun, prompting officers to pump 123 rounds into his body. However, a later investigation revealed that the gun police alleged Brown had used had no traces of his fingerprints on them. Also, it hovered there. Brown's 14-year-old great-granddaughter, Janika, reported he was not holding a gun when he instructed her to take shelter in the bathroom moments before he was killed. Sadly, Brown is just one of countless victims on America's war on drugs, the federal policy push that has squandered billions with a B of dollars overcrowding America's prisons, and might I say, giving boost to the private prison operation, which is this should be your legal practice of, let's say you and me and you, Mr. Listener, we go out and open up our own prison. And when you and I do it, we say we're only going to open this prison on the condition that you give us this 90% fill rate. So the government, in turn, in order to keep the prices down and the taxes down for the prisons, go ahead and make sure that the prisons are full of people that have no business of being in prison, and that is how you make money off of stealing people's rights to be left alone. Militarizing state and local police is something they're doing, and that means giving weapons that break posse comitatus and basically making our police a standing army, which should be illegal according to the Constitution, and making no measurable impact to reducing drug abuse. In other words, the drug rates haven't gone down. It's time for Americans to stand up against this failed policy as taxpayers and, more important, human beings. Since 2001, the Department of Homeland Security alone has spent $34 billion in federal grants for state and local police departments to purchase paramilitary-like equipment, including tanks and assault rifles. We saw this in Ferguson. While the circumstances surrounding Brown's raid may seem unique, mistakes are commonly made in SWAT operations. By the Cato Institute's count, there have been 14 raids on innocent suspects in Florida over the past 3 decades, 3 of which ended with death. So if the police come into your house and it's the wrong house and they kill you, well, that's just too bad. That's the war on drugs. Friendly fire. This problem is particularly pronounced in Florida because of the state's harsh mandatory minimum sentencing laws. Under the law, individuals can be convicted for prescription drug trafficking by simply possessing more than 4 grams, 7 pills, of opiate-based painkillers. As a result of these draconian punishment laws, it says Florida prisons are notoriously overcrowded, with more than 100,000 inmates in state custody at a cost of $2 billion a year. So you want to spend $2 billion a year so that somebody can't have 7 pills that are only hurting themselves? Many residents convicted on these harsh state laws are not violent offenders. They're not hurting anyone. They just got caught up in unfortunate circumstances. One such example was Scott Earl, a Florida man who occasionally used Vicodin to treat residual pain from numerous car accidents throughout his life. And it goes on to tell his story. I don't want to bore you by reading it. You can look it up. But it's suffice to say, he takes Vicodin once in a while and some marijuana in order to get through the pain that he's feeling. What's he facing? He's facing years in prison. He's facing a whole life ruined with the stigma of a conviction for not really doing anything wrong. I'm going to stay on this for a minute. This was an interesting story by Lawrence M. Vance on LeeRockwell.com that I just could not pass up. Legalize heroin. I read that when I first saw it. Like, what? I mean, I've always felt that way for the same reason that this person feels this way. But hear it out. Before you go leaving comments or clicking off to go watch the newest Rihanna video, just listen to this for a second. There, I said it, writes Lawrence M. Vance. Heroin. For those in a state of shock, let me say it again. Legalize heroin. And for those conservative Christians who want to use the power of the state to stamp out sin and vice, let me say it again. Legalize heroin. Morphine, dicetate, Dimomorphine, there's a whole bunch of names for it, better known as heroin or smack, is an opiate used as both an analgesic drug to kill pain and a recreational drug to get high. In other words, morphine is just a very clean heroin. I mention these basic facts about heroin because most defenders of the war on drugs, although they are adamant that heroin should be illegal, can neither tell you how its effects are the same or how they differ from cocaine, LSD, crystal meth, etc. I recently came across two articles in which the authors advocated the legalization of heroin. I agree with them, but for different reasons than stated in the articles. And I like this. It says, writing in Time magazine, Jeffrey Marin, a senior lecturer and director of undergraduate studies in the Department of Economics at Harvard U, makes the economic and moral case for legalizing cocaine and heroin. Marin is also a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, who we quoted earlier, who has written extensively on the topic of drug legalization. He believes that even if prohibition could eliminate drug use at no cost, it would probably do more harm than good. He explains that, quote, numerous moderate and responsible drug users would be worse off, while only a few abusers would be better off. In other words, some people know most people know if they're in pain. I've done it. You have a toothache, you can't get into the dentist. And get your hands on something illegal. Many of us have done it. Let's just be real. These people aren't hurting anybody. So prohibition would harm most people, according to most studies, who are using these things. But prohibition, says Marin, does in fact have huge cost, regardless of how harmful the drugs might be themselves. Prohibition of a good does not eliminate the market for it. By raising costs and prices, it may shrink the market, but then a black market emerges that generates numerous unwanted side effects. Yes, like the shooting of innocent people. Enforcement, it goes on, of prohibition also encourages infringements on civil liberties and racial profiling. Myron adroitly points out that many legal goods cause serious harm, including death. That's true. He specifically mentions skiing, snowboarding, or as known when I do it, falling down the mountain, bicycling, automobile, and swimming accidents, plus 20,000 deaths per year from illegal drugs and at least 38,000 from excessive alcohol use. Marijuana, on the other hand, appears incapable of causing a lethal overdose. The most important thing that Marin says appears is this conclusion, and I like this. Perhaps the best reason to legalize hard drugs is that people who wish to consume them have the same liberty to determine their own well-being as those who consume alcohol or marijuana or anything else. In a free society, the presumption must always be that individuals, not the government, get to decide what is best for their own interest. That's why we're not communists on this show. Listen to this. This is written by the Boston Globe by Jack Cole, who was a police officer for 26 years and is now board chair for the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, that wants to legalize these things. For 14 of 26 years, I served the New Jersey State Police. I worked undercover narcotics. On the job, I saw firsthand the addictive power of opiates, that is to say heroin. Yet I also came to understand that the destruction of whole communities did not primarily result from the use or misuse of the drugs. No, the damage came from people, cops, doing what I did, he writes, dragging buyers and sellers away from their families and slamming them into the criminal justice system, depriving both them and their neighborhoods of all hope. This also brings in gangs. If it was legal, you would not have the gang problem we have now, and people like Drake would never sell another record, thank God. I witnessed people we despairingly called junkies, he writes, dying with needles in their arms, not because heroin is a poison, but because the heroin itself was poisoned. I did more harm than good, and the harder my colleagues and I tried, the more damage we did. And it talks about all the things that legalization would do in terms of making what will always be a bad problem a little bit better than it is now. Friends, you're listening to The Correct Views. Got a couple more stories that I do wish to get to. If the high def cuts off, you can find the low def on youtube.com/thecorrectviews. I'm looking at my camera here and don't know if I have enough storage space for the next 3 articles. Friends, you're going to go to Cedar Point. You're going to go to Hollow Weekends. I went last weekend. I think you can still see the stamp. Absolutely loved it. The new haunted houses are extreme. They're very, very good, and you're going to want to go and check it out. Well, where are you going to stay? You can stay up there at the hotels they offer and advertise. You can stay at the big name hotels, and you're going to be spending between I don't know. I want to say that the you all know what your normal hotel rates are. The resort rates are like 120 upwards to $600. $600 for a room. Not you. You are going to go to the Seacrest Motel, and you're going to tell Vicky that you were sent there by TCV. You'll be sleeping in a very comfortable bed. You'll be enjoying a full bath, cable TV, kicking back, relaxing at a fraction of the cost. Why? Because you said you heard about it from TCV. You will not believe how cheap these rooms are. That's all I'm going to say. All right, guys, a few more articles to get to here. And again, youtube.com/thecorrectviews if the HDF dies. Identity of notorious serial killer Jack the Ripper has finally been revealed. This was awesome. I was very happy to hear this as somebody that's followed Whitechapel for so long. Vital DNA evidence has finally uncovered the identity of notorious serial killer Jack the Ripper. The man behind the grisly killing spree in London's East End has been unveiled as Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old Polish immigrant who ended up dying in an asylum. So it's good that he did not get away with his crimes in life. That's very good to hear. A blood-soaked shawl purchased by Arthur Russell Edwards led to the breakthrough when a scientist matched DNA evidence left on to its descendants of Kaminsky today. Mr. Edwards, 48, from Barnet, North London, was captivated by the murder mystery and had been investigating it in his spare time, but had come to the conclusion that it would never be solved. But then in 2007, he saw a Shaw and found on the body of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's victims, up for sale. He said the Shaw had been taken by acting Sergeant Arma Simpson, who was on duty the night of Dowris's death and wanted it for his wife. But horrified at the blood-soaked wrap, she never wore it, and it was stored away and passed down through generations until it came to auction 7 years ago. Mr. Edwards said, "Here I am with the Shaw and possibly the evidence to solve the most unsolvable murder in English criminal history." So DNA has solved the mystery of Jack the Ripper. We now know who he was, and that's awesome news. So the whole story on how it happened is on the page that I gave you. He didn't get away with it, friends. He died in an asylum. And back then, an asylum was like a North Korean prison. It was hell. Friends, our cell phones really giving us cancer. Pittsburgh, CBSSocial.com. I don't put my phone anywhere near the family jewels. I have lost phones and left phones behind because I refuse to keep them on me. And that's exactly what I'm going to continue doing in light of this. Chris Morse spoke with Dr. Deborah Davis about the dangers of cell phone radiation over the weekend. Dr. Davis is the author of The Secret History of the War on Cancer and Disconnect the Truth About Cell Phone Radiation. One of the first pieces of information she shared was that Apple products actually do have a warning in their general settings about microwaves giving cell phones giving off microwave radiation. I think all phones have that warning, as a matter of fact. I know mine did, and it's not Apple. Dr. Davis also said that iPods and other laptops are tested 20 centimeters away from the adult body, which means that they are not made for small children to hold for an extended period of time. Also, I've asked this question before. They say it's not bad to have a cell phone on you. You're not around a whole bunch, right? You're only around yours, so it's not a big deal. What if you're a bus driver? What if you work in a large factory? The cell phone's around you all day. If you have to have your phone in your pocket for a short period of time, it's not going to be a problem as long as you have it on airplane mode, which means you cannot send or receive messages. So for those of you that carry it in your bra